Nature evolves in layers. To study nature, to discover the nature of nature, Chazal called Maaseh Bereshis, the works of the beginning. Because the process called a human being can only be understood if we go back to the beginning, if we see what became a human being, what was it before. And everything in nature, not just the human being, but even the galaxies, they're all coming from simplicity. The simple becomes more complex and more complex until it evolves into a different form. And then the complexity continues. All of our organs have their own evolution from simplicity into complexity, and then the organs with each other and the interactions. So this complexity is what causes the human mind to lose sight of what's really taking place. It confuses us into thinking things that if we saw clearly we would never think, believing things that if we understood we would never believe. And so this process built layers upon layers of existence, starting with the inanimate, then moving into the plant life, more complex, then adding the animal spirit, which is moving, attracted towards things and repulsed from things, made to feel safe by some things and made to feel scared by other things. All this from within biological organs. So this is a new level of complexity that gave life an entirely different color, entirely different experience. But then comes the human spirit, speech, and that creates a whole new dimension of complexity. Because with speech, the human being is now creating for himself a model of reality that is not necessarily aligned with reality. And so the human spirit, the spirit of the speaker, the spirit that's the most complex of all, has been given such a wide variety of choices that it doesn't know for itself what to do with it. It doesn't know how to handle this power. It doesn't know how to use this weapon without hurting itself. Because this weapon allows it to create realities instantly with very little effort. And these realities, they become the living space of our spirit. They're very meaningful. They're very consequential. They're very important. And yet the human being doesn't understand this process appropriately to be able to wield this weapon in a way that doesn't cause harm. And so the concept of speech separated reality into two different forms, into two different influences. There's the reality that is the framework for the nefesh hamedaberes, for the soul that can speak, and there's the reality that the nefesh hamedaberes creates for itself, that the speaking spirit creates within itself for itself, and that's the reality that it occupies. And these two realities are interacting with each other constantly. They're like a male and a female. On the one hand, the objective reality, the male, the one that creates the framework, and then internally the female reality that's receiving and manifesting all the different pieces of information into an experience, into an internal reality, a subjective reality. So the objective and the subjective are constantly interacting with each other. However, the subjective lost touch, lost sight of the objective. The subjective forgot how to manage this relationship appropriately. Civilization was an attempt to somehow create coexistence between the subjective and the objective. Not in a way that is necessarily best for the subjective or for the objective, but it's an attempt of man based on his own experience, based on his own knowledge, to bridge this gap. And then the argument started, because everyone was experiencing their subjective differently, and therefore they wanted to mend the gap differently. Everyone was looking at a different gap. And so all the different cultures rise, each culture claiming that they have the antidote to heal the gap, to bring us back to reality. Eventually, humanity gets consumed with rivalries, with jealousy, with aggression, where all these different experiences that are being experienced subjectively are no longer getting along with each other. Humanity is now going in different paths until it becomes necessary to find some grounding in the objective reality, even if it's only in the objective reality that can be measured by the senses. And so if, before the Greeks, we were going to try to bridge the gap between the subjective and the objective based on the subjective, now we're giving all the power to the objective. The subjective no longer has any say. And this is the beginning of the secularization of religion, because suddenly the subjective is no longer measured as an accurate measurement of reality. We no longer are looking at the experience. Now we're looking at what can be measured objectively, but the people that we have available don't have access to the spiritual objective reality. The spiritual has become completely subjective. And so everything that we're going to be busy with is going to be based on the sensual reality, not on the spiritual reality. And so all this entire process is a process of language where we're trying to connect the two worlds. We're trying to connect the source that created the opportunity for the nefesh to exist and the experience of the nefesh within that opportunity, the experience of reality within the human soul. Somehow these two have lost each other. And we're trying through speech to reattach them. And so in order to help bridge this gap comes the Torah. Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim ves haaretz. The shamayim represents the objective reality. The stars are creating a reality based on very accurate measurements. If their measurements were off even by a little bit, then none of this could take place. They can't make mistakes. The world can't afford for them to make mistakes. And also, he also created together with that the Oretz, the earth, the subjective reality, the experiencers of that tremendous system that's creating everything on this planet. All the minerals, all the plants, all the animals, and the human that is the combination of them all the spirits that exist anywhere on this planet exist within the human. All the spirits that exist anywhere in the zodiac exist within the human. This is the basis of astrology. To understand how the forces that are in the signs, in the planets, are represented in man, and where they're represented, all the way down to the body parts. And within the body part, every body part is also affected by the other planets and by the other signs. Everything is working together. Everything is measured in the microcosm and measured in the macrocosm. It's a representative of the bigger reality, and also in and of itself, the entire system is perfected. A human being, if we were to look at the quantity of what we occupy, we would see ourselves as giants. In just one finger, we have billions upon billions of cells. We can't even imagine the size. And size is relative, meaning that if we were to stand on a planet that is much smaller in size, let's say we can run around the globe for, let's say, within an hour, and we would be the same size, we would feel like we're huge. So if we were to zoom in and really appreciate the fact that every little part of us has billions and billions of cells in order to create this experience for us, then we would realize how big we really are. We really are a universe. We really are galaxies upon galaxies of activity. And so the Shemayim and the Oretz need to have the appropriate relationship. This relationship is meant to be managed by the Torah. The Torah is coming to manage this relationship because this relationship was not doing well. If the relationship was doing well, no one would have a right to dictate how this relationship should be. But when the relationship is broken, anybody that can help the relationship is obligated to help the relationship, because this relationship gives life to everything that exists. This relationship is the reason why everything exists. This relationship is represented by all the polarities within creation. Day and night, the sun and the moon, the head and the body, the spirit and the body, the spiritual and the physical. So everything is representing this relationship. Creation is an expression of relationship. That's the definition of creation. It means I want relationship. Before creation, there's everything. There's no relationship. Creation means relationship. Those religions who are against relationship are also against creation, essentially. Because if there's no relationship, creation ceases. This is why the pasuk says, Im loy brisi yomam v'laylo, chika shmayim v'oretz loy samti. If not for my covenant between day and night, I would not place the principles that govern heaven and earth. Meaning the relationship is the purpose, the relationship is the cause. This is what we're here to celebrate. And this is why when the relationships here on this planet are healthy, then all of creation is healthy. When there's no relationship between the people that can create peaceful coexistence, then the spiritual forces turn against man and start causing damage within and without. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a partner. He created a partner, but he also wanted to demonstrate to that partner what partnership is. And so he created the partner in a way that the partner needs a partner. Every individual within our collective needs another individual to make them complete. This is in order to teach us that we as a collective are part of a relationship with the source that made us be. So the male and female relationship is a demonstration of the relationship between the Creator and creation. And that relationship is also reflected internally. So in order to keep the individual aligned with the collective, the individual himself is a relationship between a male and a female. The spirit is in a relationship with the body. The red blood cells are the females of the white blood cells. There's a relationship even in there. And all these relationships, all the processes that relate to these relationships are being run by our external relationships, because that's the conscious place where we're aware. So that's from there we're managing everything. Wherever we place our attention, wherever we place our focus, we're demonstrating to the angels what a relationship is. The angels will conform with our demonstration of a relationship. This is why in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the Beis HaMikdash, were the two Kruvim, the two cherubs were representing a relationship between a male and a female. When Klal Yisrael was aligned with the desire of the Creator, the two would embrace each other to represent this relationship between the unmanifest and the manifested. The manifested gets all its power from the unmanifest. The manifested has nothing other than the unmanifest that gives it everything. So when Klal Yisrael turns away, so then this is represented in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, there's distance. What happens when there's distance? Suddenly, every detail becomes relevant. Between friends, details don't matter. If you come to a friend and they start measuring how much they gave you and how much you've had and what you've done to them and what you said and on which day, that's not really a friend, is it? That's a whole different kind of relationship. It's a potential of a human relationship. We all have that side. But that's not the side we show to friends. To friends, we want to be there for them. We want to do as much good as we can to them, regardless of what happened till now. There's no math involved. It's just what's the best I can do. That's what I give. Because we're invested in that person's well-being. It's like we're giving to ourselves. And so the relationship, the way that we carry our relationships, the way that we demonstrate, this is what's causing all the male-female relationships all over creation to interact in that way. This is why we lost the Beis Hamikdash, for sinas chinam. The lovers not only couldn't anymore embrace, they couldn't even be in the same room together anymore. This is what we were demonstrating to the angels. This is what the angels were doing. What happens when the angels do that? Suddenly, some Gentile gets a very strong urge to come and attack us. This is a manifestation of evil angels, evil desires. This is coming because we've turned the relationship into a relationship where we're not looking out for each other. We're not really invested in the other person's well-being. We're just invested in our well-being. We're doing only what we need in order to get what we want. And then all relationships break down. Because we've made the details, the prat, more important than the klal, more important than the principle. The principle is the relationship. The details of the relationship are never more important than the principle, which is the relationship itself. If the details are more important, then the principle is no longer what's driving the relationship. It's no longer a friendship. Mutual manipulation, but not a friendship. And this is what the world learns. This is going to be reflected in our leaders. This is going to be reflected in our politicians. This is going to be reflected in everything that we do. It's going to be reflected in the animals we own, in the food that we eat, in the way that our organs digest that food. And so the dibur, the power of speech, the intelligence of speech, is what makes us qualified as the bride of the intelligence that creates. And that relationship is our primary relationship, because based on how much intelligence we receive, we're going to experience, we're going to interpret, we're going to create. Everything is based on that. And so this relationship is what drives everything. The relationship between the objective and the subjective. The relationship between the one that creates and the one that experiences. And like we know, because we worship the unity, they're all one. This is all just aspects of the same one. All relationships are relationships between one who is perceived as two. There can be no more than one. The relationship only happens because there's a perception of two. And when we remove that perception, we see through the illusion and we recognize that it is one. This is when the relationship is celebrated the way that it was intended to be celebrated. This is called dveikus. This is recognizing the unity from within, becoming one with the unity. This is the ultimate relationship. When a male and female come together, and there is no longer the male and there's no longer the female. They both recognize something. They both recognize that whoever they were before didn't really exist. This is the unity that this relationship requires. Because as we approach the divine, we imagine the divine. The divine is not what we imagine. As we approach ourselves, we imagine ourselves. We are not what we imagine. So when the divine meets the self, there is no longer the divine that was, and there is no longer the self that was. Both of them disappear. And there's just one left in their place. That one was the only one that was, but he was imagining two different ones as he was approaching himself. Because he couldn't imagine the one. He wasn't yet the one. Not in perception. Perception was still distant. When perception is distant, there really is two. When perception is distant, both that are being imagined are not real. Not the self that's imagining and not the divine that's being imagined. Both of them only become real when they are recognized as one. And the Torah comes to unite these two. This is what people quote in the name of the Zohar. Raisa v'Yisrael v'kitche b'richu chad. The Torah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Yisrael are one. What does it mean they're one? If they're one, then why don't we just listen to Yisrael? Why are we looking for HaKadosh Baruch Hu? If Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu are one, then let's just ask Yisrael what we need to do and be done with it. But Yisrael is only HaKadosh Baruch Hu through the Torah. When Yisrael and the Torah unite, HaKadosh Baruch Hu unites with them. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a specific type of Yisrael, a Yisrael that has found himself. Until then, it's really not the same one. What the one that didn't find himself is saying is really not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying. And so the unification makes it so. The unification makes it real. As we recognize, we manifest that. Finally, we can place our attention on both of these things at the same time. And that's when it's real. So this is the purpose of the Torah. This is the reason the Torah is given. Is to make this unification. This is why we say, before we do a mitzvah, we say, L'shem yichid kitche b'richi shchinte. Kitche b'richi represents the objective power. And shchinte is the one that's dressed up within. The one that's trying to perceive. The soul that has manifested and lost contact with its source. So now when we're starting the Torah fresh, we're starting over a new cycle. May this be the cycle that we get to unite ourselves with this process. May this year be the year where the Torah becomes real to us in a way that it was never real before. And may it be in a way of compassion. May it be through enjoyment, through pleasure, through calm, through peace. And may it lead us to the ultimate redemption.